Hey everybody, this is John here at the East Center. Excited about our next interview for the Community Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. Today we have Mary Ila Ward, who is a friend but also a great entrepreneur. So thank you for being here today. It's good to see you.
Thanks for inviting me, and thanks to you and the East Center staff for all y'all do in the community.
Well, thank you. So you know what's really interesting to me about what you do? Like, we all love this story of the person who, you know, everything had hit rock bottom, and then they start a business and they grow and they hire people. And I mean, we love that. You love that story.
Sure.
I love that story. You had a different challenge. You know, before you jumped in and became an entrepreneur, you had a great job at Blue Cross. You know, then you go to EDA with economic development, which is one of the best in the state, if not the best, but I'm probably biased.
Sure.
And you're a vice president there. And if anyone's looking at your LinkedIn, it's like, well, you're just moving up in your career. It's good. You're good at it.
Thank you.
And then, you're welcome. But then you're leaving it all, and you're going to just become an entrepreneur and put yourself out there. So talk a little bit about that transition when you're leaving something that's pretty good, that you're really good at, and how people responded to you saying, I'm taking the jump and I'm going to be an entrepreneur.
Well, you know, I was very fortunate that I waded into the water instead of jumping off the bridge into the water. So when I decided that this was a path that I wanted to take, and I think it was partly because I'd had the experience in a big corporate environment, learned a lot, but realized that there was a process for the process, and I wanted to create it, not live in it day to day. And so went to a smaller work environment where I had a lot of bandwidth to try new things and experiment. It was great, but kind of wanted to marry the world of human resources with economic development and workforce development. So went back to graduate school. And I was fortunate when I went back to graduate school, it was a full-time program a couple hours away, that my boss at EDA was willing to let me stay on part-time and do the work that I continue to enjoy while going back to graduate school. Fast forward to finishing graduate school, and he was willing to let me become a contractor as opposed to an employee. So they were my first client.
Okay.
And so that transition, I was so fortunate because they were willing to think outside of the box with me. That I didn't jump off the bridge from no income, from income to no income.
Yes.
And then the relationships that EDA had helped me build really formed the basis of our first client base, where we were really focused on manufacturing and work and trying to innovate the workplace in manufacturing, and then also expand that workforce development piece of how do we help communities impact their people practices across the state too, and across the country. So it was a different path, but it was a path that would probably not have been possible had I not had supportive people around me that were willing to take some risks with me.
Wow. So we need 14 hours to just unpack what you just said there. The best entrepreneurs do not describe themselves as risk takers. They describe themselves as people who minimize risk. We have this popular conception of you burn the ships, you go all in, and sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah.
But there's also such a thing as managing risk and not necessarily going from steady income to nothing. And so I hope that gets replayed a lot, because she just told you how to manage risk when you're transitioning into entrepreneurship.
Sure.
And again, the best entrepreneurs will say, we don't consider ourselves cowboys and cowgirls, risk takers. We see a market opportunity, we try to go in there with the lowest risk and the highest upside.
Yeah, and I think the opportunity to surround yourself with people that are going to be supportive of that. Of course, I had the work community that was, but then my husband was in a very stable industry with insurance, and he was super supportive of me going back to graduate school and making a transition. And so, we balanced those risks, and now we're in a place where he's doing the entrepreneur thing and my work is more stable. And so it's, you've got to also realize the seasons you're in and the people that are around you, and take advantage of those relationships and just the stage of life you're in.
Absolutely. So what's the elevator pitch for Horizon Point and for
Sure.
MatchFit?
Sure. So Horizon Point, we help communities and organizations innovate the workplace through people practices. So thinking about how do we do everything from hiring to training to development to organizational design in a way that's forward thinking and helps to recruit and retain the best people. Same with a community. I just call workforce development macro HR. It's just looking at it at a different scale. And so we help communities to think about how do we recruit and retain the best. You know, we do things like wage surveys and benefit surveys that help support a collective community with data and information. And also look at things like labor participation rate. We're involved with the State Automotive Association right now trying to impact the labor participation rate because that's a key challenge.
Yeah.
So it's great to see that the welding of the macro world with individual organizations and, you know, how do we elevate people?
Yeah, okay. That's great. And I know you've done it for people locally, but also around the state, outside the state, other places. So what about the best piece of advice you have for people making that transition? Like you talked about, all right, your husband was supportive, shout out to Drew, you know, and you were also able to jump in, but now you have that stability. But there's a lot involved in making that transition. You have children. Talk about your advice for.
Yeah, so I think on the very practical side of things, some of the best advice I got in the beginning was you get a good attorney and get a good accountant. You don't want to spend the money on those services up front, but in the long run, if you're in it for the long haul, it's going to set you up for success, and it's going to pay off very quickly. Especially if you're getting involved where there's multiple partners or there's, you know, more than one person or family involved. A good accountant and attorney and banker can really help advise you on the best way to do things so that you can see what you may not see and make sure that you've thought through those things from a legal and financial perspective before you get into them. So that's just real tactical.
Yep,
I think the other piece is, and I've said it again, and I'll probably say it 10 times, is just surround yourself with the right people. That accountant and attorney and banker is that, but, you know, friends, groups, you know, that's one thing that has been somewhat challenging for me is that in the size community that we're in, there's not a lot of female entrepreneurs. And so how do you find those connections that, you know, you just can vent, you can talk about things that are challenges that they have some context for. And then I've said it again, you've got to embrace the seasons you're in. One of the reasons why I made the jump is because I realized I was working from 8 to 5 and that environment dictated that, and understandably so, but we were looking to the future to have children, and I thought, I don't know if I can sit here when my work's done while my child's in daycare. What's a different model for that? So I think employers have got to think about that too as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So that gets us to the final part, future questions. So first one is, what's the future of the companies? What does that look like?
So yeah, so we merged MatchFit into Horizon Point about a year ago. MatchFit was an offering to help. It was an assessment tool and algorithm to help match people to employers based on organizational fit. So we often look at job fit, and we really feel like the research says we really need to look at organizational fit more. So we tried to launch that separately for a variety of reasons, but then realized it was really just a better offering within Horizon Point. So future-wise, we're just really trying to scale what we do best. Really started out in manufacturing, as I mentioned, grew to other industries. There's so much business in North Alabama, which is just a wonderful opportunity that I think sometimes we all take advantage of. So we're still trying to capture that, but also doing a lot of things statewide. And we have some certification programs that are even virtual and international. So just trying to figure out how we, you know, scale at either whether it's a geographical level or a service offering level right now.
That's good. Well, I don't doubt you will. And then last question. So we're hearing a lot about the future of the workforce.
Sure.
And the future of the workplace. So just focusing on the place, everyone's saying, well, there's work from home and there's hybrid and there's come and go. And that's kind of the media stories we're seeing all the time. But you're on the ground every day. what do you see as the future of the workplace while employers are trying to build, you know, a place where employees want to come contribute?
Sure. So I think a couple big rocks there. One is we are structured as a society by and large to think of time as money. So we pay people for their time. Even think about wage and hour laws, if you're exempt or non-exempt.
Yeah.
You have to pay overtime or not based on the hours you work. So there's a lot of hoops around that, but time is not necessarily money. You may be able to do the same thing that I can do in 2 hours that takes me 4.
Or vice versa.
And so who's more valuable? And so I think we are in this process of slowly rethinking that. And I think that's really important for us to do as a society. What creates value and how do we measure that? Time's really easy to measure, so that's why we pull to it. How do we measure it? And then how do we pay people? How do we compensate people? How do we structure work around that? Related to that, I think the second big shift or big rock is a trend towards I'm gonna pick and choose, you know, it's kind of the gig economy, right? The Uberification of the economy. But I think we're gonna see that more and more in traditional industries. So I had a conversation this morning with an automotive, and what we call an OEM, so the major manufacturer of automobiles. And, you know, there's, even in that industry that's very structured and very traditional, there's technology now that is saying, okay, I wanna work these hours and you've got an opening on these hours. I don't wanna work 40 hours a week, so I can come in and fulfill your need. You get your need met, I get my flexible work met. We're coaching a company now with Alabama Launchpad that's doing the same thing in the hospitality and restaurant industry. So I really think that COVID shook things up, but it really just accelerated what I think was already coming. And employers are gonna be competitive, are gonna be able to say, we don't have to think about work and time like we traditionally did, and are gonna be able to, you know, meet in the middle. We're gonna create win-win situations instead of employees gotta win or employers gotta win. We can all win.
That's why she's the expert. So Mary Ila, thank you so much for this today. It's always good to see you, and continued success. Appreciate what you're doing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you. All right. Bye.